Welcome, everyone. My name is Tom Dunn. I'm the chair of Division 1 of the ABA Forum on Construction Law. The forum has 14 divisions, and that's the way to get involved with the forum if you want to. Division 1 focuses on construction litigation and dispute resolution. And we've been lucky to partner with Forum's Law Student Liaison for the past three years. And this is the third year we're doing this program focused on law students and really featuring how diverse and interesting the practice of construction law is. And our present law student liaison from the ABA Law Student Division is Chris Cabrera, and he's going to be our moderator tonight for this program. If you have questions, comments, please feel free to put them in the chat room. And if you want to learn more about the ABA Forum on Construction Law, you can reach any of the panelists today. And we are going to have a breakout session towards the end, so you can ask questions and meet some of your fellow colleagues on this call. So Chris, why don't you take it away, and thank you to all of our panelists and to Lexi Pereira for doing this for a third year in a row with me. Thanks, Lexi. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Tom. The forum is lucky to have you spearheading Division 1 and these law school outreach efforts. I also want to give a big thank you to Lexi for helping put this thing together and helping me along the way as well. Moving on to the main event, I want to first and foremost give a big thank you to our amazing panelists for being here today. I'm sure everyone is excited to hear from each and every one of you. So first of all, in order, Seth, Jessica, then Ethan and Peter, could each of you please introduce yourselves by providing your name, a brief description of your practice, but most importantly, how you all came to become construction lawyers?
Well, thank you, Chris. I guess it looks like I'm number one in the order. My name is Seth Schimmel. I'm an attorney with Phelps Dunbar, and I sit in the Tampa office. I guess you could say I'm chair of our construction practice. We've got a pretty dynamic group. I've been a construction lawyer almost my entire career, which is now coming upon 30 years. And I handle all sorts of different types of construction cases, mostly sort of the bigger projects, mostly public projects, a lot of bridges and highways. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk. But, how I became a construction lawyer, I guess when I was sitting in your seat in law school, the courses that I had the best results in and I found the most interesting were contract related courses. I got into practice, and some of the lawyers in litigation who I was working with, they were construction lawyers, and they introduced me to the practice. And as I joke with people, a construction case for the most part is usually it's just a big several 100-page contract. And I had some good results, and I kept getting more interesting cases. And 30 years later, a lot less hair, and what I do have is much grayer. Here I am. So in a nutshell, that is how I got involved in practice of construction law.
I think I'm up next. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Bogo. I am a partner with Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw, Pittman in San Francisco and LA. I have also been practicing construction law almost my entire career. I did not go into law expecting to do construction. I was an English major, theater minor in school. But I happened to be in the office on Christmas Eve when another of our partners was walking the halls looking for help on a matter. And I was in the office and I helped with that matter and loved the work and continued doing the work. And so that's how I got involved. And the takeaway there, I think, is your practice area and with the direction you take in life is a little bit luck and then what you make of that luck. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about why ending up in construction is such a great move professionally. But now my practice focuses on representing general contractors and owners, primarily on larger projects, typically on the private side. I do advice and litigation.
All right. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jessica and Seth. And It's nice to meet everyone. My name is Ethan Teeger. I'm Deputy General Counsel at Consigli Construction Company. We're located primarily in the Northeast. We do have offices kind of throughout New England, New York, DC, North Carolina, some of the Mid-Atlantic, and down in the Caribbean as well. I myself have been practicing almost about 10 years now, and I think when I was in law school, I don't think I really thought I would ultimately end up as a construction attorney, and I think that kind of speaks to some of the path that you can take, and how you start out in your career isn't always where you'll ultimately end up. But every day I'm kind of thankful that I did end up where I am. And during law school, I always envisioned myself wanting to be in-house, working for a large company. And through different opportunities and different experiences, I was able to get here. And just a little bit of background on Consigli itself. We're a large construction management and general contracting firm. At any given point, I think we probably are doing maybe about 250 different projects across our markets, do around close to about 4 billion in annualized volume, a lot of large scale commercial construction contracts and projects rather. So a lot of the work that we focus on is probably the life sciences, biopharma, academic, healthcare market segments. A lot of public and federal contracting work too. And I got my start I clerked for a judge for a year, went off to a couple different law firms. And from there, it was really just getting, more experience with different subject areas that interest me. And, for a long time, I was doing some real estate litigation, had just some kind of general contractors, creditors' rights litigation, and just found myself more interested in the real estate, more interested in the construction side. Got a fantastic opportunity to come in-house with a real estate developer down in Florida. And then after a few years kind of seeing the ownership side, it's kind of really apparent to me that I wanted to make that shift over to construction specifically. And this opportunity at Consigli opened up a few years ago, and it's just been great ever since.
Hey everybody, so my name is Peter Graffio. I'm an associate over at Melchiotti Marks and King. We're down in New Orleans. So we're a law firm. We primarily represent insurers that are actually the insurers for contractors, architects, engineers, different things like that. So just kind of another side of the construction law industry. So the way I got into construction law was, all the way back in high school. I had always known I wanted to go to law school, but I was always a math guy. So I had a conversation with an attorney at the time, and he said, why don't you go try engineering, give that a shot. So I went and I got my civil engineering degree. And then after that, I worked as a civil engineer, and I was going back to law school. And originally I thought I was going to start doing patents and doing kind of different patent work. But as it turns out, not too many people, are patenting different kinds of concrete. So construction law actually lent itself well to my past experience as an engineer and everything like that. And I'm very glad that I got into that. Interned a little bit with some patents and didn't really even like it that much, and kind of fell in love with the construction law side of it anyway. So that's how I got into that.
Well, thank you for the intro from all of our panelists. Moving on to the next question. This one is for Ethan and Jessica. Can you please tell us what is unique about practicing construction law, the breadth of the practice, and specifically what you enjoy about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great place to start. I'm definitely fortunate to truly say each day is challenging and rewarding by really just being able to participate in the company's business operations and working closely with some of our executive leadership. I think one of the best aspects of being in-house, and in my perspective, is being able to really see kind of the large scale projects that we're working on it, and taking that from initial bid and pre-construction phases of the job through project buyout, through maybe setting up a GMP, or a guaranteed maximum price, which is a type of contract delivery method. And then working with the project team through claims, working through some of the contractual construction disputes that typically arise during the course of a job, and kind of helping our advise our team members all the way through through the project closeout. You know, construction law to me is it's unique in that the nature of the business, it's always kind of testing your risk appetite. And I think that's an important kind of theme throughout each one of our practices, where, you know, obviously the end goal is you want to deliver a project on time and on budget, but it's really how you guide along that process and work towards that end goal that you kind of measure your success. You know, there's certainly litigation and disputes that can arise or kind of emanate from the projects. A lot of the job, at least for me, being an in-house attorney, it's the risk management and advising really how to de-escalate problems and avoid them from the first instance. So in that regard, you know, thinking critically, finding solutions to matters just so you can move on to the next issue and avoid them before they become larger problems. You know, because I can certainly take it from some of our team leaders. There is absolutely no place that they would least be than answering discovery and sitting for a deposition. They rather be out there winning work. And my job is to really help them achieve that and make sure that they're focusing on, you know, kind of growing the business and not so much focused on some of the more negative aspects that can come out of a construction project. But I think, you know, a typical construction lawyer, it goes a lot beyond just reviewing and writing contracts. You know, I think it's unique to where you're really brought in at any moment's notice and you have to react quickly. Your teams are going to look to you to give them advice quickly, and you got to use your best business judgment, your prior experiences to know that you're leading your clients in the best way that you can, and that you're ultimately getting them to the best direction possible. So you got to be confident, you got to be decisive, and just kind of trust that you know enough in a given situation where you're given good advice. And hopefully more often than not, you're right too, which helps. But also just for me, one of the last aspects too, just being in-house is I really do love just kind of getting out, visiting a job site or walking a job with one of our team members, and sometimes seeing an issue in person, getting up close and understanding an issue where you can take a step back, look at it from a practical sense and get a real picture of what the issue is that you're dealing with. You know, that's a really rewarding part of the job and an interesting part of the job. And yes, we do get to occasionally wear the hard hats too. So that's a plus.
Thank you, Ethan. So Jessica, could you give us your perspective?
Sure. And to build on what Ethan was just saying, from the outside counsel perspective, construction law provides a real opportunity to partner with your clients. I started as a litigator, and my joke initially was, I'm a litigator in my blood. I'm only interested in litigation. But as you do litigation enough, you start to see the issues that can come up for folks and helping them then prevent those issues from coming up down the line. And so you start to appreciate even more the value of the advice piece as well. And because so much of our work requires knowledge of the industry, knowledge of a project cycle and issues that can come up, arming your client with your experience as well and helping them identify and prevent issues is exceptionally rewarding. And so that ability to partner with your client, I think is something that other areas of law may also be able to enjoy, but I think we in particular get to enjoy that. And another aspect that I found really rewarding is that construction law is high altitude lawyering, okay? Because it is a specialized industry where you need to understand the client, you need to understand the industry, you need to understand the terminology. In every matter, I learn about something new and the science behind whatever was happening on a project or another way to do a delay analysis or what have you. And so you have an opportunity to always grow and always learn and then build upon that knowledge in a way that's exceptionally valuable for your clients, because you can't just decide one day you're going to be a construction lawyer. You actually have to invest the time to understand how you can best serve your clients on the industry knowledge standpoint. And then the law itself is also exceptionally complicated because it is informed by an industry that is very specialized, and it is informed often by a complicated set of statutes. We're an area of law that is very statutorily controlled because of the public and societal interests in the work that we do. And so an example I love to make is, I tease antitrust lawyers that they have basically 2 statutes that every state have been emulated, and there's roughly 8 million cases interpreting what those statutes mean. But on the construction side, we've got roughly 8 million statutes, and there may be 1 or 2 cases interpreting any given one of them. And that interpretation may be based on a former version of the statute that no longer is active. And so when you are assessing what are the requirements, what is the applicable law in your matter, there are a lot of considerations at play from a legal perspective, figuring out what the statutes say, figuring out how the cases interpret it, and then also figuring out what does the contract say, because as points we're making earlier, so much of what we do is informed by what did the parties agree to in the first place. And so you have to be very smart in order to be able to account for all of the various variables and facts in a given issue to ascertain what's going to make the most sense going forward. And then related to that, something that I've enjoyed is that for the most part, my adversaries are reasonable people because they recognize, rightly, they could end up on the other side of an issue down the line. And so there does tend to be a greater likelihood of folks seeking what's reasonable here, not posturing, not arguing for argument's sake and wasting everyone's time, but really trying to get to the meat of things and figure out what the resolution is, which, by the way, then also allows you to focus on good lawyering, because then you're not having to worry about the wasting time on the posturing and other aspects. You can actually get to the merits of things and have real conversations about how to get where everyone really wants to go.
Great points, Jessica. Thank you. I'm sure that as law students, we would like to know the perspective of a young associate 1 or 2 years out of law school. So Peter, this one's for you. Could you please describe a day in the life of a construction law associate?
Sure. So I have been practicing for almost 2 years now. I would imagine my day-to-day is probably pretty similar to a lot of the other people on the call, actually, in terms of day-to-day life, getting into the office, bright and early. I usually make a list the night before of a to-do list for the next day. So I make sure and check my emails, and then really get to work, and just get to work on the tasks at hand until later in the afternoon. And then I can, go home and relax a little bit, hopefully. But in terms of the actual work, the substantive stuff you can expect, I guess, as a young associate, at least for me, in my experience, it started off, rather small. So it's specific research tasks where the partner will ask you to look into specific little issues that's going on with their case, and you're going to be drafting a memo, explaining to the partner what's going on that particular legal issue or factual issue that's happening within the case. I'll never forget, right after I took the bar, one of these smaller tasks that I was talking about, I was asked to draft a removal into federal court, which, is like right up your alley, right after you take the bar. It should be fresh in your head. So it's little things like that you kind of start off on. And then, as you start to gain some more trust, obviously the partners are going to be giving you, bigger and more complex tasks to handle. And, eventually maybe they'll start asking you to handle certain files, somewhat on your own. And that includes, anything from going to take depositions to going to certain motion hearings. And, you're the one who probably drafted the motion at that point. So you're going to be the one that's most familiar with it, but you're going to be, going to the hearing, and then eventually maybe even, recommending or talking strategy with a partner, or maybe discussing things with the client, different things like that. So all that kind of wrapped together in your day-to-day. And with so much going on, that's why I like to make that to-do list at the end of my day. Make sure and check that first thing every morning.
Good advice, Peter. I'm gonna actually take that advice and start making my to-do lists. Moving on, this next question is for Jessica and Ethan. One of the unique features about construction law is that there's so many key players to the main transaction, making it incredibly complex. The key players include owners, subcontractors, general contractors, and design professionals. And many construction lawyers have the chance to represent each of these types of players. So I guess the question is that many ethics and compliance issues can arise. And can you explain what type of role construction lawyers play from an ethics standpoint?
Sure, I'll kick this one off. So like you said, there's a lot of variables to consider when you're representing different entities or parties in the transaction, right? And so if you typically represent general contractors, then you may run into a greater likelihood of conflicts with subs or with owners. If you're typically representing owners, you may more typically end up with conflicts again with general contractors. And so, and the larger the firm that you're working at, the greater the likelihood of these issues arising. And so you want to make sure wherever you are, that you are attentive to those issues. And so as a more junior person, typically there is someone above you who is mindful of that. And once the matter has come in, it has cleared conflicts. But one area where I have seen more junior folks have a real opportunity to help mitigate risk and be attentive to professional responsibility considerations is if new parties need to be added to a matter after it's initially been opened, or if there is a third party that you're going to need to subpoena documents from, or what have you. Being mindful about also running conflicts on those new parties, also running conflicts on those potential third parties that you would be subpoenaing to ensure that you don't have any conflicts that would prevent you from doing that. And so being mindful of the conflicts issue, I think, is exceptionally valuable. You don't want your firm to end up in the news for getting disqualified because of a conflict. And so paying attention to that at the start is valuable. Then we've also got the obligations to make sure that we're properly educated and can adequately represent our clients, right? And I've seen so many times where someone has an opportunity to represent a construction client, and so they've never done anything like that before, and they just start filing things and have no idea what they're doing and really step into it. And so you're allowed to represent in most, I can speak for California, that's where I'm located. You're allowed to represent on an issue that you haven't necessarily represented before, but you have that ongoing duty to make sure that you become appropriately informed and can do that. And so making sure that you become appropriately informed. And that can also apply to technology as well. In California, for example, you have a responsibility to know how ESI, electronically stored information, works, so that when you're producing documents to the other side, you're not inadvertently disclosing to the opposition privileged metadata or other information that you didn't intend to produce. And so you have an obligation to make sure that you understand the technology as well. And so those are the main areas where I see ethical or professional responsibility issues coming up, and real opportunities for junior folks to point out those issues and make sure that you're meeting your ethical obligations.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that too. I mean, I think it's such a good point, because so often in the matters that come in the door, there's so many moving parts to it, and it's important to keep track of the underlying concerns with making sure that as an attorney you're meeting your ethical obligations. But I'll speak to a little bit of a different aspect of this too, where I think a large part of the question they asked, Chris, I think is getting at getting at the ethical and compliance concerns that a practitioner has themselves, but also I think it's important to talk about the ethical concerns that are likely to arise on a construction project itself, which is certainly something that I see being in-house. And a in-house lawyer for a large contractor. I'm based in Boston, as I mentioned, and I'm one of 3 attorneys that we have here in the company. And I think the best way to kind of frame our department is that we're more or less the scorekeepers to some of the jobs that we're managing. And I think there's a lot of risk involved when you're going through and you're performing a lot of public work, whether it's state, local, or federal construction projects, ones that involve public money. If they're federally assisted jobs, there's a lot of eyes that are on these projects. So it's really kind of fostering that accountability for each one of your project teams, but it extends beyond that, right? It's helping each one of your project managers, your project executives, your superintendents, the entire staff that's actually putting the work in place, making sure that they understand what their contracts are requiring, and making sure that they are keeping that level of transparency that's expected, not only from the clients, but from the community as a whole, from the investors in a project, from the local governments and the permitting agencies to the inspectors, the whole gamut of all the players that are in the construction project, just beyond the typical owner itself. And I think to do that successfully, a law department for a contractor, a general contractor, from my experience, is to make sure that you're fostering that business ethics program, and that you're making sure that each one of your company personnel and employees are understanding the risks and the pitfalls that can come with it, so that they can meet those ethical and legal obligations. I think one of the things that are interesting that are popping up recently are some concerns around disadvantaged business enterprises. We've seen a lot lately, minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses. There's a lot of recent initiatives by, whether it's the Department of Justice or if it's some other administrative or enforcement agencies, sub-agencies in the federal government, that are prioritizing looking at contractors and making sure that because there are federal dollars involved or public money involved, that you're not only meeting your requirements to represent fairly in your purchasing work effectively, and you're meeting some of these project goals, but then also that you're navigating some conflicts of interest, that you're not engaging in any false claims, that you're basically running by or just performing the work to the book. And a lot of times they'll basically give you the test, and you just need to make sure that you're having the right answers put in place there. And at least from my experience, one of the things that I can talk about too is I've helped put in place some of our code of conduct, some of our compliance policies that we have here as a company. And we don't have necessarily a compliance department. A lot of this kind of funnels through different departments. We'll have some that's legal focused, some that's human resources, some that's accounting. It's all the different departments within our group working together to try to make sure we're meeting those ethical obligations on our construction projects. But one really interesting initiative we've done lately is looking at job site bias motivated events, and then trying to put policies in place to better tackle some of those concerns that really, as a whole, the construction industry has really been plagued by in its history, and just bringing attention to harassment and discrimination issues. So for me, it's been really exciting trying to take an active role and kind of tackling that real issue that we're seeing every day, and seeing how it puts in place, and if it's adding language to our subcontract to make sure that we're holding our subcontractors responsible for ensuring that they're not allowing or fostering discrimination or harassment in their crews. If it's treating a incident like a safety concern, where it's really no different than if there's a worksite injury, it's keeping everyone safe, and that includes mental safety and emotional safety as well, which is an approach that at least Consigli has taken in how we're responding to some of these incidents. But just seeing that play out in practice and being part of some of the initiatives to tackle a real life ethical concern has been really interesting, and a unique aspect that you get to see when you're as an in-house lawyer. So I think it's a difficult time to be in construction as well, just given all the public dollars that are starting to come in, and how much work is actually getting done. I'm sure a lot of you can look around in your communities and see just down the block, there'll be, tons of cranes, tons of work being put in place, and construction is definitely booming, and with that comes a lot of risk management and understanding the local players.
Well, thank you, Ethan and Jessica, for providing your perspective on ethics for both private practice and in-house. Moving on, we're gonna ask Seth and Peter to please describe one or two interesting projects that you've worked on recently or are working on.
Hey, before you answer that, Seth and Peter, if one of you could weave into that discussion at some point, the kind of unique aspect of construction law about how you have, standard form of agreements and how they interrelate with projects, and or the kind of early adoption of ADR, mediation and arbitration. A lot of law students I speak to are particularly interested in those concepts. So go ahead, sorry.
Seth, you can start.
Yeah, sure. I'll lead this off. I've had a lot of unique experience, probably, and I had thought beginning of last year, January of 2022, okay, got kind of my standard projects kind of clicking along, nothing unusual that I haven't seen, and all of a sudden I get a phone call from a lawyer actually up in Boston who had a client that was front and center in the Champlain Tower tragedy. That, some of you probably have all heard in the news about the collapse at Surfside, where 98 people died. And I was asked to get involved, and I was asked to assemble a team to get involved in representing the general contractor who built the neighboring high rise. And the allegations were that even though the construction was 5 years before the collapse, that it just in Florida, for example, some of you on the phone, you'll know that in Florida, there are no basements. So if there's any construction case in Florida, chances are there will be issues relating to the soil. It's called technical stuff, but it's below ground. And the claim was that they disturbed the ground and it contributed 5 years later towards the collapse. And that case, not just construction cases, it touched everything that you could imagine with the practice of law. Obviously, it's a high-profile case. It was just a nonstop from early in the morning to late at night, 7 days a week. And I had never, usually you think about construction cases and it's usually people just arguing about money, right? For the most part. And here you had to really deal with a human tragedy, that's something I had never dealt with before and never probably will. And it involved, in addition to the construction issues, you had to deal with, I can't tell you how many hours I was on the phone with, and it was off the record conversations with reporters from the Miami Herald or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, trying to shape the story and make sure that they had the correct information. You were holding the hand of not just your clients and being an advisor to them, but insurance carriers were involved at multiple levels. Anything you could ever imagine, I don't think I'll ever forget in terms of, obviously the standard agreements. The first thing you do when you get involved in a case like that, you look at the contracts. And I know everyone criticizes either the AIA documents or the other standard form agreements, but as soon as you suggest using another agreement, everyone gets suspicious of it. So they go back to it. I mean, you modify it, but they go back. And I see Ethan smiling and shaking his head on the phone. The case ultimately
1000%.
Right. The case ultimately resolved. The mediator, and it was not, people think about alternative dispute resolution and you think you have a one-day mediation and maybe there'll be a second session and you're there late at night. This mediation was like nothing I've ever seen before. The mediator was involved over a 5-month process on a number of different mediations going on at the same time. I think that mediator, and he said he was doing it pro bono, and unlike the plaintiff's lawyers who initially came in and said they were doing it pro bono, which I guess my definition and my understanding of pro bono over the last 30 years is a little bit different, I guess, than their definition. But the mediator spent probably 1,000 hours on the case over a 6 to 7 month period. And did not accept a penny. Didn't. He actually, the judge wanted to give him something and he said, no, I said I was doing this pro bono for the good of the order, and he was. So everything you could imagine, not just about a construction case, but as a case in the practice of law, to me, it was crammed into about 6 or 7 months. And there were many funny stories about that case, and it would take too long to tell. But one funny story I will tell you at the end. The case finally settled, and the judge really, he was a very active judge, and he wanted the case settled before the 1-year anniversary of the collapse, which is unheard of. And he got it done. And I remember we had a hearing to approve the settlement. They were all by Zoom. It was on a Saturday morning. He told us not to wear shirts and ties, and he also joked that if you wear them, I know you're wearing shorts underneath it, so it doesn't matter. We were finally finished, and I remember going to dinner with my wife. And again, I would go to work early in the morning, come back late at night, and we were outside eating dinner, and the sun was still out. She looked at me and she said, "Good Lord, you are green." Because she hadn't seen me in the light of day in probably like 5 months. But it's something I'll never forget. It was one of the most memorable cases I ever worked on. The team, and it provided the good news is a lot of young lawyers. They really cut their teeth on that. You just have so much going on that you have to delegate. People have to do something. For a young lawyer who's interested in construction or any case like that, you get to jump in and show you that you're part of the team, work as hard as you can on it. And I think everyone became a better lawyer because of it. So I go on and on about it. Like I said, I could write a book, but I won't. But that is probably the most unique, and it's a pretty recent experience I've had.
So for me, I don't think mine, were as large as that, but I think it's more, for me at least, the interesting things were some of the things that I've gotten to do as a young associate in some of these cases that I've been asked to handle, for my firm. So, for example, I had a really interesting dispute was involving the surety. We were representing the subcontractor, and the payment bond surety was really who we were going against in the case. But it was this really technical argument. To be honest with you, I didn't really understand it at first. It kind of took the partner and another senior associate quite a long time to kind of explain kind of what was going on, so then I could get in there and start doing some really good work. But it was really just about whether, an unpaid subcontractor could get paid, after a release bond had been filed from the payment bond. But the interesting part about this whole thing was really that this really complicated issue that had taken me so long, they gave me the fun task of, going to argue against the motion to dismiss. So I got some really great experience just having to prepare for that, to, actually going to argue that. And I think on top of that, that case is actually going to be going to appeal. So at that point, I'm also now handling the appeal side of it too. So it's just another layer of learning and things that I haven't done before that are just really interesting to me on, how to learn, different parts of this practice. The practice of law, you're always practicing. So that's certainly true. And I guess one more really interesting case, it actually was a hurricane case. There was an entity that had paid for the work to be performed on multiple different properties after Hurricane Ida. But that entity didn't actually own any of the properties. So at the end of the day, there ended up being a payment dispute. We represented the contractor who wasn't getting paid by the entity. And then on the back end of it as well, all these property owners also had alleged defective work. So we had to go in, and we had brought suit in federal court already, and all of these property owners ended up coming in state court and filing suit. So that was really fun procedurally to kind of figure out how to get all of these issues kind of worked out and get everyone into the same forum, and then take some depositions and kind of really get my hands dirty on that case. So those were two pretty interesting cases for me.
Thanks, Peter and Seth. Moving on to the next question, and I'm gonna ask Seth for this one. What do you think are some successful traits that a good construction attorney should have?
Thank you. And again, I'm going to try and tailor my remarks to the audience that we're with, for people who are thinking about, after law school, getting into construction law, what would be helpful. And I think it's, first of all, it's common to any lawyer, whatever law you're practicing in, what are good traits to do? I mean, obviously, no one's going to expect you when you come in to be a business generator or anything like that. Just do good legal work. Sort of showing up is half the job. Being there, being available, being willing to learn, paying attention to detail. These are things, whether you're a construction lawyer, patent lawyer, tort lawyer, whatever it is. Because, again, like Jessica, for example, I was a history major in college. I had no engineering background. And in fact, sometimes it's a benefit, because if I can take something complicated and explain it to a layman, then that's going to help you. I mean, for construction law, though, becoming a good construction law, what I have found is the lawyers that were classically trained as commercial litigators and understand the rules and know how to write and know how to reason, they will be successful lawyers. So if you were to think about what made you successful as a law student, some of the things: working hard, paying attention to detail, all of those things. There's no sort of secret sauce to being a construction lawyer. It's the same traits, I think, that made you successful in law school, that you found worked for you, will probably work for you in the practice of law, in terms of working hard, beginning your career. Obviously, your skills that are going to develop as you become more senior, but I would start with, hey, I want to be a good lawyer no matter what I do. And there are certain traits that are common that you can see, and I look at when I'm looking at young lawyers, who's willing to take the challenge. I have first-year lawyers that are out deposing people. I mean, they've shown that they can do it. They're appearing at hearings, they're handling things. Use the traits that got you to where you were. Keep doing it. That's sort of, in a nutshell, what I would say.
Thank you, Seth. Great advice. Ethan, could you elaborate on that from the in-house perspective, and maybe give us the students some insight on how to get an in-house position, and what your clients think is helpful?
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate what Seth mentioned just now, because I do think it's such an important point, is coming out of law school, you're not going to be expected to have the years of honed business judgment, right? It's about finding the opportunities and finding the experiences that are going to help you ultimately become that successful lawyer. And for at least myself, I didn't have any formal construction training, certainly not in undergraduate, and in law school too. As I mentioned, I wasn't picturing myself being a construction attorney. I did know I wanted to be in-house. So I knew at some point I'd have to learn a business. What that business would be, that was TBD. But I think so much of it is just getting out there, getting experience. And I agree. I mean, myself, I was a commercial litigator. I find myself all the time relying on those experiences, viewing, and I think this is what Jessica mentioned not too long ago, is having those different lenses that you can view problems through, and ultimately where a dispute is going to end in, and it's how, in being able to avoid getting to that place in the first instance. I mean, that's really where the expertise and the judgment comes from. But that is it. I mean, from my experience, it's business judgment. It's being having to the point legal advice, and I think, just thinking back, so often I see lawyers who have the tendency of viewing a problem through such a narrow lens of, well, what's the legal answer to this? And from my perspective, that's not always the right way of doing things. I think a lot of times there's so many other considerations at play, especially when you're working closely with business leaders and you're working closely with project teams who, they just want to make a profit, and they want to get a job done, and they want to hit their financial goals for a certain job and move on to the next one. And I think a good example, that take a subcontract negotiation that I might be handling, and I'll come up, with a lawyer on the other side who's representing a subcontractor, and they'll be focusing on a host of problematic terms for them that just in all practicality aren't really likely to be an issue given the sub's scope of work or given what the project actually is. And it's, seeing them go through these mental gymnastics of trying to find, answers to every hypothetical problem, where I'm thinking, what's the real reality of what they're doing, right? It's making our business teams hesitant to give more work to this subcontractor. And it's almost defeating the underlying goal of winning more work by having such a protracted and difficult subcontract negotiation. So, it's realizing, what's really the most important. And I think that speaks to also that risk spectrum, risk tolerance that I was talking about earlier. And it's just getting that right advice to your team members. Where I think as lawyers, a lot of what we do is we need to know the why for a particular issue. But our clients, and for me, I've got one client, I've got the company, and I've got our different project executives. But they're often not so much concerned about the why, right? They want to know what's the answer. What do I need to do? What do I need to be mindful of to hit my own business objective? And the more that I've seen to be involved in the business and being side by side with some of our project teams, I know exactly what they're looking for. But like I said, that's not something that you're going to develop overnight. I myself had the benefit of being a solo general counsel for a real estate developer where, I was it. I had no one to bounce ideas off of. I had no one to, and I had some outside counsel that I worked with that were good advisors to me, but it was really just figuring it out on my own and hoping I've got enough knowledge and expertise to know I'm making the right decision. And here at a larger company now, and I've got two other lawyers who are with me, our chief legal officer and our general counsel, who are very experienced in their own right. It's us collectively figuring out, well, how do we divide and conquer, and how do we get the best advice out to our clients? I think there's so many times where you could get into certain issues where you do have to know the specifics, you do have to get into the minutia of a problem, but it's the speed, it's the it's the volume that really I think makes you successful in getting those quick answers out.
Thanks, Ethan. And the repeat play that you're talking about there with your subs and dealing with the same players, Jessica, is there a difference from your experience as a construction attorney, where you're doing a contract or you're doing disputes, of dealing with a construction lawyer from the ABA Forum on Construction Law or a local bar association versus a non-construction attorney? And I guess what characteristics and difference does that make to a case to be involved in a bar association focused on an industry like construction law?
Yeah, it's a great point, because it does make such a difference. And a lot of times,
Ethan, I was asking Jessica that, but thanks for
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I'm interested in hearing Ethan's points on it too.
Me
I
too.
don't want to cut him off.
No, please go ahead.
So I think really the segue here is to talk about the value of membership in an organization like the ABA. I think that the starting premise is the value in being a construction lawyer. And I think one of those primary values, not only the interestingness of the work and opportunities for the relationships that we've talked about, but also we need more construction lawyers. We don't have enough of them, and we need good ones. And so there are a lot of opportunities for law students to find a really rewarding practice. And so that's point one. But then to find where those opportunities exist, the forum, there is no larger bar association for construction attorneys. And so you're going to have the greatest exposure to folks all over the country by getting involved with the ABA. And then above that, it's just the quality of the people that you meet. And it's then not only valuable for that initial contact and finding what jobs you may be interested in, but then as you become an attorney, making those connections so that then if you've got a geographical need, say you've got a client who's looking to go into a new market, you can identify someone that you're familiar with, that is going to have good judgment, because so much of this comes down to good judgment. Like what Ethan was talking about before, it's not just technically what can you do under the letter of the law, but under all of the circumstances you're considering, what makes the most sense. And so being familiar with folks so that you know who has good judgment is so exceptionally valuable. And then from a practice experience standpoint as well, if you need to know someone who's familiar with contractor licensing, for example, or something that can be very draconian if not done correctly, knowing the folks you could reach out to talk to about those kinds of issues can also be really valuable. And so making those connections serves you not only in getting in the door, but then also being able to really enrich your experience and the experience of your clients once you're in the door.
Yeah, and Chris, you are the law student liaison for the ABA Forum on Construction Law, and that's a pretty important job, and you've done a fabulous job. Explain why you found value in doing that, and you're going to be graduating soon, and I guess do a plug for that program for some of the law students who are attending this or watching it later on, as to why they should apply to be the liaison for the ABA Forum on Construction Law.
Yeah, definitely. So being interested in construction laws from the inception of law school, I tried to find organizations that I can get involved in, and the ABA was the one that stood out to me the most. I actually attended this same seminar last year, and reached out to Lexi, and she helped me get involved right off the bat. And around this time last year, I think the applications came out, I applied, and I got the position. So the benefits of joining, Jessica touched up on it really well. The networking aspect is amazing. You get to meet so many players in the industry, construction attorneys, and even experts by going to these 3 annual meetings that the ABA hosts. As a student liaison, one of the big benefits is that if you're available, they fly you out to the meetings, and you get to participate and learn from industry experts. In addition to that, you get to collaborate, you get to get involved by putting these panels together, helping put them together, and it's just a great time. I've enjoyed every single minute that I've been able to be involved in. So yeah, if you're looking forward, if you're interested in becoming a student liaison or getting involved with the ABA Forum on Construction, feel free to reach out, and I could guide you in the best possible way that I can.
And just to add, there are several other ways that you can get involved. You can write an article for the Division I blog. A really great way to do that is to reach out, maybe even to one of our panelists, to see if they'll co-author, and you do the research and you're able to, get to publish something. Another thing you can do is participate in the law student writing competition, which the applications are due June 30th. That's something that, you could start working on now with a professor, doing pretty thorough research to try and, win the competition, which has some pretty cool perks. Yeah, you can attend the meetings, whether they're the regional ones or the annual ones, if they're nearby you, or you can always travel too.
And
All right, Chris.
as a really impressive role. I mean, Lexi, you were the law student liaison for 2 years, and now you're your first year of practice, and she's already been appointed as a standing or steering committee member of one of the divisions. I think that must be a record of anybody in the history of the forum, 45 years or whatever it is, to become a leader of the forum the first year you're in practice. So you can really make some substantial, meaningful resume building activities by getting involved. And Lexi's and Chris are the test case for that. So I guess, is there like final takeaways? If you could go back again and be your law school self-graduating or at law school, what advice and what guidance as far as, practice in construction law or practice in general, you want to impart to this group. I'll just go through the list on my screen. Ethan, you want to start out?
Yeah, sure. I think it's just reiterating what we've talked about here, where, I think if you're interested in a career in construction law, I think the best thing you can do as either a law student who's coming up on graduation, or maybe you're just starting out on your law school journey, I think just trying to build your network early, and trying to, if you know that you're interested in a career in construction law, find those local attorneys that are practicing, find those local contractors, those companies that are working on projects, and see if there's opportunities. And if not, don't be discouraged, because chances are they'll know someone that does have an opportunity, or know someone that that maybe you can shadow or intern with. And I think for myself, just going back, it would have been a lot easier, I think, in my journey early on, if I just was better at really fostering my network and utilizing it, right? You go to different events, and the ABA is great in that regard, where they'll host tons of different events where you can go out and meet people, but keep up with those connections, stay in touch, because a lot of times down the road, those are the same people that can help you get started on your own career. So that's kind of the best advice that I could give.
That's great. Jessica?
My advice would be not specific to construction, but I have found immensely valuable. If you are not yet familiar with the concept of the growth mindset, I would highly encourage you to look into it. There is a book by Carol Dweck that introduces the concept. Really, I think she may have even been the one to invent this concept or identify it. And it is identifying what is the difference between people who are successful and the people who aren't. It's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset people believe that, and I'm going to get this wrong, but big picture, that basically all abilities are innate and already predetermined, and as good as you're going to be is as good as you are right now. A growth mindset philosophy is more, I can't do it yet, and it's the yet at the end that's key. And so when you encounter any challenges, instead of negative self-talk and saying, I'm not good at this, I guess I should go do something else, add the yet. I'm not good at this yet, and focus on the process and learning and getting better and growing and finding value in that process and the growing. It's the practice of law. We are always learning. We are always getting better. And if you focus on that, I think you'll enjoy the practice of law more, and you'll find greater success because you'll be focused on the process.
That's great advice. Seth?
So again, my advice going back to law school is, just do what brought you there. You know what I mean? Because I remember as a young lawyer, I felt like I had to reinvent myself almost, that I had never done this before. I was at a law firm. I was probably a little bit younger when I graduated, maybe a little less mature. And I just figured, okay, I have to recreate myself. I have to be this different person or this different lawyer. And when I realized that what had worked for me in the past, usually if you get to law school, you've done well academically to get there. And if you graduate from law school, you've done the work to graduate. And you look at those habits that have worked for you, and you keep doing it. No one, you're starting out new, you're there to learn. You don't know it yet, as Jessica said. So the best thing to me when I'm looking at a young lawyer or a new lawyer, are they there? Are they willing to, get in the boat with me and start paddling? Are they working hard? That's one thing you can control, right? You can show that you care, right? I remember the final point I'll make is I remember when I started out at one of the firm I started with, the senior partner said, look, no one expects you to go out and bring in a bunch of clients. In fact, we wouldn't trust the client if they were to hire someone who didn't know anything, right? But we are your clients. The more senior lawyers you work with, we are your clients. So treat us, work on that. Pretend we're, take care of us, make our lives easier. Because once you make our lives easier, then we're going to want to keep going to you. Because there may be some folks that don't make their lives easier. And the people you work with, they're not your professors. They're there to help you and to mentor you. but you're also supposed to help them. And when you show that you're of value, that you're working hard, even if you're going to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to make them, as long as they're mistakes because you're working hard. So that's the advice I would give to everybody.
Great. And Peter.
Sure. So I just have two quick points. I think my first one, which I wish I would have known before starting working as an attorney, is really, kind of going back to what everyone has been saying, that you don't know everything and you're not supposed to know everything, is really don't be afraid to ask questions, especially if there are other associates in the firm. You don't have to sit behind your computer and try and figure out something for a crazy extended amount of time, when you could just as easily go ask, one of the other associates, or if the partner's free, go ask them, and maybe they can point you in the right direction and you can get that cleared up a lot quicker. And I think my second one is, I think a lot of, people I graduated with and that I've talked to, and even a little bit me at the beginning there, you might fall into a little bit of imposter syndrome, or you might self-doubt yourself in some of the work that you're doing. My advice there is just know you've made it through law school. You're eventually going to get a position with a firm, and you deserve it. You deserve that, and they're giving you that for a reason. It's because you've worked hard, and you're obviously smart and you work hard. So don't fall into that trap of self-doubt or anything like that. Just have a little bit of faith in yourself and know that if you put in the work, the hard work, then the results will show.
Thank you, Peter. So I want to give a big thank you to our fantastic panel. If everyone could just give a nice virtual round of applause to give them a big thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Lexi now, who's going to tell us how we're going to be sent to breakout rooms for the networking session.
Yes, thank you so much. So yes, we're going to open up the breakout rooms now, and I'm not sure if you guys have to join your room that you've been assigned to, or if you'll just get sent. But thank you all for coming. Stay for the networking portion, ask additional questions. They're evenly spread out among students and lawyers. So thank you everybody for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now. And